Hello and welcome to the EPRI Current. I'm your host, Samantha Gilman, and today we will be speaking with one of EPRI's rock stars, Neva Espinoza. She's the Vice President of Energy Supply and Low Carbon Resources here at EPRI. We'll be talking about the practical realities of the energy transition and the opportunities and the challenges that brings about as we shape the future of energy. But first off, before we get started, Neva, thank you for joining. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do at EPRI in that role?
Great. Thanks, Samantha. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me today. So in my role at EPRI, I oversee basically the research that focuses on energy supply, not nuclear energy supply, actually. So all things in the thermal world, so fossil fuels, all things in the renewable world, as well as low carbon resources, things like hydrogen, ammonia, synthetic fuels, and biofuels. Really looking across the board at how those technologies integrate into this energy economy, not just today, but in the future ahead.
So as we start the conversation, I'd like to set the stage for our listeners. If you could give us a brief overview of the unprecedented change and opportunity the energy industry is facing right now.
Yeah. So unprecedented change, can that be an understatement? I'm not really sure, but it somehow is. So the changes we're seeing around the global energy economy are huge. And I think of them in three different buckets. So I think of them in terms of an energy supply bucket, an energy demand bucket, and then what's happening in weather. And so from an energy supply kind of perspective, what we see is the global economy is really driving towards decarbonization, lowering the carbon intensity of electric supply, right? Which is integrating new resources to the system that are carbon-free, things like renewable assets. And it's also challenging our existing firm dispatchable assets, things like coal and gas assets, in ways it never has before as we try to reduce carbon intensity. At the same time, the demand bucket is going in the opposite way, right? So the supply bucket's kind of challenged down. The demand bucket is going up. So first of all is economy-wide decarbonization is an electric intense type of thing. So it inherently drives more electricity use, which increases the overall demand. At the same time, you see data centers, artificial intelligence. Last year in 2023, we saw the democratization of artificial intelligence, seeing huge demand for data centers across the system. So huge up in what the demand side is trying to pull from the supply side. And then that last pillar is weather.
To that point, Neva, just a couple days ago, EPRI released a report saying that the AI-driven demand in data centers may raise electricity demand of data centers up to 9% of total generation in 2030.
So supply challenge, demand going up, right? And lots of ways demand's going up. And that's a new one, right? That's a new thing that nobody necessarily anticipated happening right now. And we're going to continue to see new things over the coming decades, right? So supply down, demand up, and then weather. You got this weather bucket of weather is becoming more impactful, more intense. Higher highs, lower lows, more extreme winds, right? A higher impact of rains. That's happening for longer durations of time than we've ever seen. And it's regionally beginning to expand different areas. And so those three kind of pillars are diverging each other. And it is just creating all new challenges or opportunities, depending on how you want to think about it, in this energy system that we have to think about going into a net zero economy.
And for those listeners out there who are interested in this extreme weather aspect of this challenge, as our listeners know, EPRI has launched Climate Ready. We have multiple episodes out there. So if you're interested in those episodes, go to epricurrent.com and look at some of those past episodes on that topic. So understanding the many challenges of the net zero transition, what can the power sector do to best serve customers along the way?
Yeah, so that's a great question because we all know it's so important to be able to maintain the reliability and the affordability of the electric system, right? Because it's going to be a huge enabler of entire economy-wide decarbonization. So, I would say we really need to be realistic about what practical realities exist when we think about this transition, right? Because the transition, we talk about a net zero economy, but the fact is the energy economy today, 80% of that energy economy is supplied from a fossil fuel. So when we think about 80% of the energy economy today supplied by a fossil fuel, we want that energy economy to achieve net zero. What are we going to do about that? And, people say, how would you eat an elephant, right? You hear this, like, you're going to get asked one day in a job interview how you eat an elephant. And you say, the answer is, I'm going to do it one bite at a time. That's not so different than this energy transition, right? We need to think about this in chunks and how we can actually do it to step from an 80% fossil fuel economy to a net zero economy. And so that means looking at those chunks in different ways. What are technologies available today that we can actually utilize to take a big step? What are the very next set of technologies that we'll need to do it? And then what are the technologies that are maybe further out that we need to be investing in now, understanding in now, but we know they're not going to be available for a decade plus. We just have to prepare ourselves. So really being practical and understanding the true challenge, not hoping there are going to be things there without putting in the time and effort now.
When speaking of those sort of different chunks of the elephant there, as we think about this process, how do low carbon resources play into that?
Yeah, so you say low carbon resources, and that can mean a lot of different things. And so when we think about low carbon resources at EPRI, we typically think about new fuels, things like hydrogen, ammonia, synthetic fuels, and biofuels, and how those new fuels become part of an energy economy. That is more than a decade away, quite honestly. We are still in the development and pilot demonstration of many of those things. Those fuels will require a whole new energy economy that really isn't stood up today in a low carbon way, right? Those fuels need to be produced. They need to be transported and stored. And then we need to figure out how we use them in the different applications that are right now high carbon applications. So EPRI is doing a ton of work in developing and understanding what that potentially looks like in the decades to come.
And speaking of EPRI's work on those low carbon resources, we have the Low Carbon Resources Initiative, LCRI. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about LCRI?
Sure. So LCRI is our Low Carbon Resources Initiative. It launched in late 2019, early 2020. So we've been focused on this area, really focused on this area for the past 5 years. It is a partnership we have with GTI Energy. So our two companies work on this initiative together. And today it is the largest research collaborative that I'm aware of that focuses in this space. There are over 60 companies today that are part of the LCRI globally, really driving to understand and accelerate the deployment to achieve a net zero economy in the hard to abate sectors, understanding what that integration and impact may mean for the electric sector, because the electric sector actually may be a huge producer of these fuels and or supporter of them, as electricity is going to be key to utilize to develop them in the future.
And the great thing about LCRI, similar to Climate Ready, is it really helps demonstrate EPRI's value in being the collaborative body, bringing these different organizations, these different companies together and tackling these big problems, these big challenges together and finding solutions. And I know LCRI is nearing its end, but the work is certainly not ending. Tell us a little bit about the other work similar to this that EPRI is sort of now bringing in that's going to be focusing. Some things that come to mind is I know we've been doing some work on the low carbon ammonia or our hydrogen hub projects. Anything you want to share with our listeners on some of those projects?
Well, so and all of that kind of falls under this LCRI umbrella, right? So we say it's almost over, but it's never going to be over because there is just so much work to do. So today, the LCRI portfolio represents about $600 million worth of research and development, right? And that goes from understanding the foundation and the fundamentals of these different ecosystems all the way to demonstration and application of this in different parts of the world, right? So through the LCRI, EPRI has been part of all of the world's first demonstrations of hydrogen blending in gas turbines, and that's just going to expand. We are currently shifting into our demonstration portion of the Low Carbon Resources Initiative, which is really going to focus on global demonstrations of technology and then pull all those learnings back to one spot. Because one of the things that is so important as part of this transition is making sure we are learning from each other and building on what every single project does and learns. We can't all go at it alone. Going at it together, pulling together those foundational learnings, developing standards and codes and design specs and procurement specs and guidelines and site acceptance testing, all of those foundational things that are fundamental to an energy economy have to be developed for this new part of the economy.
Given what you said, Low Carbon Resources Initiative, it's really not going to end. We're going to keep working on this. And given that, what are some of the key areas the industry may look at in the coming years, even the coming decades?
Yeah, so I think we see, well, there's a lot of this, because when we, you asked in the beginning about low carbon resources, and I went down this pathway of these fuels, right? Because that's how we bucket low carbon resources. But these things alone are not the answer. There is no silver bullet to this overall transition, right? Back to being practical reality. There's not one thing that's going to solve it. There's lots of things. And so we're also going to need nuclear in the mix, a lot of nuclear in the mix, quite likely. We're going to continue to integrate renewables into our systems. Right now, we're integrating a ton of battery storage into the systems. We're going to need to integrate longer duration energy storage technologies. We're going to need carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration technologies to become part of the mix. So, and that's just on the energy supply side, right? On the grid side of the house, if you will, there's the idea of virtual power plants or demand side management approaches that will be needed. There's the idea of grid enhancing technologies. How do we get more out of the existing infrastructure we have to optimize that as much as we can? So, we talk about bites of the elephant. All of these bites of the elephant have to happen in order to actually achieve this net zero economy.
And speaking of the grid enhancing technologies, EPRI just launched the Get Set initiative, Grid Enhancing Technologies for a Smart Energy Transition. Listeners, keep an eye out for that topic. We'll have an episode on it soon. So keep an ear out for that one. Now, you alluded to this a little earlier, but could you talk a little bit more about the need for entire energy economies to support these emerging resources?
Yeah. So, just think about the electric system today. It did not get built in a day, obviously, but not even in a decade, right? It has been a century of building, right? We have hydro assets on the electric system today that have been operating for 100 years, right? This system has taken many, many, many decades in order to build. And that's because it's not just building one thing. It is building an entire ecosystem and infrastructure that connects all of it. And so when we do a lot of work in the modeling space, and we've recently completed a net zero analysis that says, okay, for the U.S. economy, what will it potentially take to achieve net zero? And so what we see is somewhere between 2 to 5 times the capacity that we have on the system today based on different scenarios, or kind of bounding scenarios of what that can look like. The infrastructure needed to do that is huge. Now, you think about new fuels. Well, new fuels need to be moved, probably in pipelines, right? And if they're different chemical makeup, they may need different piping. They may need new piping, right? So all of this infrastructure to move energy around has to be invested in and built. And so that has impacts on communities. That has potentially, right? Because we have to understand where we are building it. We have to engage with the communities that are there in order to make these decisions and move these things forward. So, we tend to talk about the technology piece of it, and that is so, so important because we know technology takes decades, but infrastructure and scale also takes decades. And decades plus decades is just more decades, which means we have to be realistic about the time it's going to take to see this transition happen.
So through this talk, we've talked about a lot of opportunities there are to decarbonize and to support electrification and these great opportunities that are in front of the energy sector at the moment. But with those come these great challenges, the practical realities, if you will. Why do you keep at it? What is it about this that makes you come back every day to EPRI and lead this group and, work on these challenges?
Well, it's easy with EPRI, right? It's the people. First of all, our mission. So our mission is really a public-facing mission, right? As you know, Samantha, and most of our listeners probably know, but EPRI's mission is a public-facing mission where we are here to help ensure the safety and the reliability and the affordability and sustainability and resilience and all the abilities, environmental responsibility of energy. And so that's a really special mission, and it is embedded into our EPRI culture, and that makes our people amazing. So we just have these amazing people that are really working towards driving and helping the energy ecosystems do that. And that's amazing. And not just our EPRI people, but our community. So the electric sector and the energy sector in general that we get to engage in, they are so committed and passionate about what they're doing and trying to, serve their customers and the public in their product, electricity or energy. And it's really quite motivating and something that I feel very, very fortunate to be a part of.
Well, thank you. This has been a good conversation. I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed it as well. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with them?
We know that, I always talk about these net zero goals, and, I like to say the goals are aggressive. The technologies needed to meet the goals are not ready. They're certainly not ready at the cost or scale we need them to be. And technology takes a long time to develop. But as a collective energy economy, we can come together and do this. And sharing learnings, collaborating, thinking differently than we ever have before. I'm really excited to be part of the community that does that. So, I'll just leave you with the importance of collaboration as we move forward and the importance of optionality as we move forward. I'm remiss not to talk about optionality. I have to. Hold on. So optionality, the idea of keeping as many technology options on the table so different companies can choose something that meets their need, their natural resources they have available to them, their community, the economy that they have locally, having all different technology options on the table, accelerating all those technologies so we have choices in the future cannot be under prioritized. And so collaboration and optionality, there you go. Really, really important as we move forward.
Those are good last thoughts to leave with our listeners. I really appreciate it. Neva, thanks for joining. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule. I know you've got a lot going on, obviously, given the conversation we just had. And thank you to our listeners for joining. Neva covered a lot of topics today, which we have explored on multiple episodes on the EPRI Current. So I recommend looking at any episodes you may not have listened to yet, and also keep track of our episodes coming up because we'll be talking more about some of these topics like hydrogen and Get Set. So with that, we're going to close out for today. I thank everyone for listening, and I'm Samantha Gilman, your host of the EPRI Current, and we'll talk to you next time.
If you like today's show, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast. And feel free to share the podcast with your colleagues and friends. For more information about EPRI, please visit our website at www.epri.com. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter at EPRI News. Together, we are shaping the future of energy.